Imagine waking up in Alaska and realizing the gas station is closed, the grocery shelves are half empty, and the delivery trucks that usually arrive every morning are nowhere to be found. The radio station that usually plays upbeat music is now broadcasting urgent updates about shortages. By noon, people are lined up at the few stores still open, buying whatever they can before it's gone: milk, canned goods, batteries, even pet food. Tensions rise as neighbors exchange worried glances, wondering how long this will last. By the evening news, it's official: the state's food, fuel, and supply lifeline has been cut off. Not by warships. Not by some distant foreign enemy. But by America's oldest ally, Canada, a shocking twist no one saw coming. Before we dive into how this shocking move unfolded, and what it means for the United States, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the stories the mainstream media won't break down for you. The start of the crisis. This all began when former President Donald Trump decided to hit Canada with crushing 35% tariffs, publicly blaming them for America's fentanyl crisis. It was a move that caught many off guard. The White House painted it as a necessary crackdown on what Trump called a weak Canadian approach to border security. But in Ottawa, Prime Minister Mark Carney saw it as something else entirely: a direct attack on Canada's economy and national pride. Carney didn't respond with anger in front of cameras. Instead, he called in his top advisors and studied America's weak points. He wasn't looking for a short-term jab, he wanted a move so strategic, so perfectly placed, that it would force Washington to reconsider its entire approach. And the target he found was one most Americans rarely think about: Alaska. Why Alaska? Alaska might be rich in oil, fish, and natural beauty, but when it comes to basic survival, food, fuel, building materials, medicine, it's shockingly vulnerable. Over 90% of Alaska's essential goods have to pass through Canadian territory before they reach the state's cities and remote towns. It's not a matter of choice, it's geography. The shortest and most reliable supply routes run through British Columbia and the Yukon. Every truck carrying fresh vegetables, every tanker delivering gasoline, every shipment of lumber or steel, they all cross Canadian land first. That's Alaska's Achilles heel, and Carney knew it. By targeting these supply routes, Canada could create chaos in Alaska in a matter of days. And because Alaska is part of the US, that chaos would immediately become a federal problem, a problem that could quickly turn into a political crisis for Washington, especially if the public began demanding swift and costly federal action. The first strike: toll laws and bans. British Columbia moved fast. Within days of Trump's tariff announcement, lawmakers introduced new toll laws aimed specifically at goods traveling to Alaska. These weren't minor tolls, they were steep, calculated to make transport so expensive that costs would explode before the goods even reached the border. The second move was even more direct. Ottawa announced selective bans on certain U.S. products, focusing on goods from Trump's strongest political states. Washington apples, Idaho potatoes, Midwest beef, and Southern timber were suddenly facing steep restrictions or outright refusals. The message was clear: if you target us, we'll hit your base. And this wasn't just a trade measure, it was a calculated political strike, designed to apply maximum pressure not just on Washington, but on the states most likely to rally behind Trump in any political showdown. Alaska feels the pressure. Within a week, the effects in Alaska were visible. Gas prices jumped overnight. Grocery stores started rationing fresh produce. Construction companies reported delays because lumber shipments were stuck at the border. Fishing operations that depended on Canadian fuel suppliers faced sudden shortages, forcing some to dock their boats. And this wasn't just about prices, it was about uncertainty. Every trucker hauling goods through Canada now had to calculate whether the trip would even be worth it. Some refused to take the risk. Others were delayed for days by sudden inspections and slow processing at border checkpoints. For a state already used to higher costs of living, this was a nightmare scenario, one that left residents anxious and politicians scrambling, as emergency supply plans were dusted off and talks of airlifting essential goods became part of serious government discussions. The ripple effect hits the lower 48. The problem didn't stay in Alaska. Because of how supply chains work, delays in one part of the system can ripple across the entire country. Factories in Michigan and New York that relied on Canadian raw materials started reporting production slowdowns. Auto plants faced missing components, forcing them to cut shifts. Paper mills ran short on pulp shipments. Even breweries in the Midwest complained about delays in receiving specialty hops and packaging materials that traveled through Canada. In some industries, things got dire. Furniture manufacturers who depended on Canadian lumber faced material shortages. Small-town grocers in northern states reported higher costs for produce because shipments were being rerouted through longer, more expensive paths. Food distributors warned that if the bottleneck continued, prices could rise another 15 to 20% within a month. Even maple syrup, a small but symbolic trade product, suddenly spiked in price, triggering headlines and consumer outrage. Social media lit up with posts from angry customers showing empty shelves or price tags that seemed outrageous just weeks before. Within 2 weeks, over $2.8 billion worth of goods were stranded at or near the border. Trucks sat idle. Warehouses filled up. Ports saw container backups. Businesses began warning employees about possible layoffs if the standoff continued, with some already planning temporary closures. The shockwaves from this single trade choke point were now threatening the stability of multiple U.S. industries. Geographic blackmail. This is where the situation took a darker turn. Canadian officials didn't hide what they were doing, they called it territorial leverage. In other words, Canada was openly admitting that geography was now a weapon. It wasn't just about who sold what to whom, it was about who controlled the roads, the ports, the fuel depots, and the choke points that goods must pass through. In the past, trade wars were fought with tariffs and sanctions. But this was something different. This was about controlling physical access, deciding who gets to use roads, ports, and rail lines, and at what price. It was about rewriting the rules of economic warfare, using geography as both shield and sword. For the United States, this was a wake-up call. If one of its closest allies could use geography as leverage, what would stop other countries from doing the same in the future? Imagine if Panama shut down the canal to U.S. ships, or if a European ally blocked airspace to American cargo planes. The precedent was dangerous, and it was now playing out in real time, with Alaska caught in the middle. Canadian media praised the move as a masterstroke of political strategy, while U.S. commentators called it an act of betrayal. The truth? It was both, and it signaled that the days of assuming allies would never weaponize geography were officially over. Mark Carney's strategic gambit. Mark Carney's strategy wasn't just about punishing the US, it was about proving a point to the world. Canada may not have the military power of the US, but it controls vital access points in North America. By showing that Canada could choke Alaska's supply lines without breaking any international laws, Carney was sending a message to every other nation: trade isn't just about economics, it's about geography, infrastructure, and control of the map. In Carney's view, true power lies in the ability to influence movement of goods, resources, and even people, without firing a single shot. By quietly leveraging Canada's geographic advantage, he highlighted how modern conflicts could be fought and won in boardrooms, shipping lanes, and rail yards rather than on battlefields. It was a reminder that in today's interconnected world, control of a key shipping route or border crossing could have the same impact as a military blockade. Carney's maneuver was also a calculated warning to other trading partners: underestimate Canada's leverage, and you might find your most important supply chains suddenly at risk. In geopolitics, sometimes the strongest move is the one that doesn't look like a direct attack, until it's too late. In the end, Carney's move wasn't just a chess play against Trump, it was a masterclass in how smaller nations can wield strategic leverage without firing a single shot. Canada has shown that in today's world, power isn't always measured in tanks or missiles, but in the ability to control the flow of goods, resources, and critical access routes. This is a warning to every global power: underestimate your neighbor, and you might just find your economic lifeline in someone else's hands. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the stories shaping our world.